Rising music stars Buddy Holly, age 22, Ritchie Valens, 17, and the Big Bopper, 28, board a small single-engine private plane, heading to Fargo, North Dakota for the next concert on the tour.
Iowa, three of the nation's top rock and roll singing stars, Ritchie Valens, J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson, and Buddy Holly, died today with their pilot in the crash of a chartered plane.
The Winter Dance Party Tour started January 23rd, 1959 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Musician Buddy Holly would headline a grueling schedule of concerts covering 24 cities in 3 weeks. The tour would also feature Ritchie Valens, J.P. Richardson Jr., aka the Big Bopper, and Dion and the Belmonts. The tour was nicknamed the Tour from Hell for good reason. Starting with the tour dates, they zigzagged from state to state with seemingly no organization, creating longer distances and travel time between the shows. Weather conditions were extremely poor, with snow, icy roads, and temperatures between 20 Fahrenheit to negative 36 Fahrenheit. The musicians were transported by reconditioned school buses, either unheated or with heat not working properly. There were makeshift sleeping bunks on the luggage racks above the bus seats. There were 5 separate buses used on the first 11 days of the tour because the buses kept breaking down. On one occasion when they broke down, in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, the musicians had to huddle together under blankets, burn newspaper in the bus aisle, and drink, telling stories to pass the time. On this occasion, Holly's drummer Carl Bunch got frostbite on his feet and had to be transported to the hospital, missing the next show. They all went long periods without being able to wash their clothes, with Buddy and the others wanting clean laundry. February the 2nd, 1959 marked the 11th stop on the tour at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, which originally was supposed to be a day off for everyone. The musicians performed 2 sets that evening, with the last ending at about midnight. Buddy Holly is often described as the most influential of the early rock and roll musicians, with hit songs That'll Be the Day and Peggy Sue. When they arrived at the Surf Ballroom, Buddy decided to charter a small private plane to fly the 400 miles to Fargo, North Dakota for their next concert, not wanting to get back on the bus. The extra time would allow him to get some better sleep and have a chance to wash some laundry. There would be room for 2 other passengers on the small plane, with Buddy offering the first spot to Dion DiMucci for $36, which was a third of the plane fare. Dion once said his parents' apartment rent was $36, which was a lot of money at the time, and passed on Holly's offer. Dion and the Belmonts were best known for the hit songs Run Around Sue and The Wanderer. Buddy then asked his 2 tour mates if they wanted a seat on the plane. Bass player Waylon Jennings, who would later be known as an outlaw country musician with hit songs Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys and Good-Hearted Woman, gave up his seat on the plane to the Big Bopper, who had been battling the flu for days. The Big Bopper, popular radio DJ, reached number 6 in the American chart with his hit song Chantilly Lace. Buddy's other tour mate, guitarist Tommy Alsop, was then given the last seat on the plane, which would now include Buddy, the Big Bopper, and Tommy as the intended passengers. Ritchie Valens, also sick at the time, asked Tommy multiple times for his seat. Eventually, Tommy would pull out a $50 from his pocket, flip the coin, telling Ritchie to call it. Ritchie called heads, winning the toss and taking the seat on the plane. Tommy would later say he wasn't sure why he decided to flip a coin. It just happened.
For some reason, I just pulled a $50 out of my pocket and flipped it and said, call it. He said, heads.
Richard Valens was the first Mexican-American to break into the mainstream music, having made 3 albums and achieved a number 2 chart position in the U.S. in 1958 with his song Donna, a song about his girlfriend. His rock and roll reworking of the traditional Mexican song La Bamba on the B-side of Donna was a huge hit, along with Come On, Let's Go. At the end of the show, a small group of fans followed Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens, arriving at the Mason City Municipal Airport, located close to the Surf Ballroom at 12:40 a.m. They boarded the single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza with Roger Peterson as the pilot. Roger Peterson had been flying for 4 years with a total of 711 hours. Of those, 128 were in Bonanzas. He had a total of 52 hours of instrument training, but unfortunately none in this type of plane. Roger was always known to be eager to fly, as he had goals of flying professionally in the airlines. At 12:55 a.m., They all had a normal takeoff with light snow on the runway and high winds up to 35 miles per hour from the south. After takeoff, Roger immediately made a 180-degree left-hand turn and climbed to about 800 feet, starting to fly in a northwest direction. The clouds were low. There was no moon, no stars, and no lights on the ground. With increasing snow, all greatly reducing visibility, forcing Roger to rely on his instruments only. The main instrument Roger would use for the horizon line is called a gyro, but this model plane had an older gyro model than Roger had been trained on. The pitch display of the older gyro was the reverse of the instrument he was accustomed to. Therefore, Roger could have been confused, thinking he was making a climbing turn when in reality he was making a descending turn, which ultimately caused the right wing tip, striking the ground first at approximately 165 to 170 miles per hour, sending the plane cartwheeling 500 to 600 feet to its final resting place against a fence in a frozen cornfield. Only Roger's body was found inside of what remained of the fuselage. All the musicians were thrown from the plane on impact and were found near the wreckage. The wreckage was not discovered until 9:35 a.m., 6 miles northwest of the airport. There were no witnesses to the crash, but since the plane showed no engine nor any other mechanical failure, with the landing gear still in the up position, officials concluded that Roger, the 21-year-old pilot, was too inexperienced to be flying in these weather conditions with instruments only. The board would also conclude that 9 months before the crash, Roger had failed an instrument check, and the weather briefings supplied to the pilot that night were seriously inadequate, which could have led to the pilot underestimating the severity of the weather situation. In the 1950s, their songs rocked the nation. They were three rock and roll legends who helped pioneer new music genres and progressive music. Buddy and the Crickets helped bridge country, rock, and R&B, being a heavy influence on the Beatles and Bob Dylan. Ritchie Valens was a pioneer of Chicano rock and Latin rock, and inspired many musicians of Mexican heritage. The Big Bopper helped combine elements of country, R&B, and rock and roll with witty humor, distinctive singing, and songwriting. As destiny would have it, the winter dance party brought them all together, which ended in a tragedy that would change the course of rock and roll. Don McClain sang, "It was the day the music died, but their legacies in music lives on forever." You can now find a giant pair of glasses, just like the pair Buddy always wore, marking the trail to the crash site and another small marker where the plane was found. If it had not been for the many twists of fates on February 3rd in 1959, the outcome would have likely been different. For Roger Peterson, if the plane had the gyro he had been trained on, or if he had obtained complete weather reports, it may not have resulted in the accidental crash. For Buddy Holly, if all the tour conditions were not so bad, he would have likely not chartered the plane. For Dion DiMucci, if he had not thought the $36 fare was too much money, he would have been on the plane. For Waylon Jennings, if he had not given up his seat, he would have been on the plane. For the Big Bopper, if he had not been sick with the flu, he most likely would have not asked for a seat on the plane. For Tommy Allsup, if he had won that coin toss, he would have been on the plane. And for Ritchie Valens, if he had lost the coin toss, he wouldn't have been on the plane. It happens by chance, strange or unfortunate in some way. It's a twist of fate.